did everyone get a chance to take a look at this?
Let's see it.
Okay.
Shut
I
up.
was,
Sorry.
I only heard that shut up, so I missed the joke.
All right, good thing you didn't hear it.
So has everybody gotten to at least the first side of their mold yet? Does everybody think they're going to be there soon?
Yeah. What does it mean?
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So, do you remember last time I put in the gate where we're going to pour in, we're going to inject actually our resin. I've got the 4 little vents for the bosses that are going to hold they're going to hold the electronics to the top of the lamp. And then I've got these 8 vents around the outside, okay? Which and the 8 vents I'm hoping are going to be sufficient to vent the rim of the lampshade, okay? We're going to find out because we're going to pull this apart and I'm going to mix up the right stuff and inject it in here today. Forgive me for not being more prepared today, but I was walking around to visit all you people with Fearless Leader. Had a great time, learned a lot, fantastic. And now it'll take me an extra 2 minutes to get things prepared once we're underway. Ready? I'm going to just pull this stuff apart, right? So, see it works? See how well it works? Yes. There you go. No, I'm going for success now. We'll leave it there. Well, that's how it's so this must be somewhat magnetic. That's cool. It's a feature. Can you see what I'm doing? Okay. Cool.
Like trick candle.
My kids love those trick candles. They think they're hysterical.
That's library.
Oh, I know. You don't want to eat cake after that. No icing for me, please.
Oh no.
So, one easy way to take these glue joints apart, right, is by using gravity. You can just kind of go like that, and right? Well, no, it's just faster, and it'll wake up the people who are also in studio with you at 2 o'clock in the morning. All right, cool. So, since we're recording, I'll try to do this to the camera too. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, see? That is a good sign. That means that I can feel the mold release, the Vaseline is still in there. So that actually did its job. So I'm just going to go around here and slowly pick this up.
It's like creature.
So satisfying.
Boom. All right, cool. So look what we did though. We had some silicone go down in around my clay piece, right in that little hole. And I'm pretty sure that I'm now kind of in the scraping out silicone mold. It looks like I can get this out of here, like maybe it wasn't the best bond in the world, which is good because I don't want it there. Okay, that is that'll mess up the finished part. And since I expect all of you to achieve perfection, I should at least try.
Could you pull out the original part and Vaseline all that and put the part back in? Would that help with that, or would that make it gross looking?
I try to keep the mold intact with the part because there is a little bit of surface tension that will hold the part into the mold. But in this case, because it's kind of flexible in the way you take it apart, and the fact that this has got a lot of draft and it's polyethylene, which means nothing will stick to it, I was kind of it's an uphill battle to keep this in.
Oh, okay.
I could have done what you're talking about, and had I known that it was going to be like this, I would have pulled it out and put some in the areas that I now know need to have a little bit
of
poly. Okay. If you remember these pieces here, those are the ears that are going to create my little pivoting point, right? Okay. So now let's see how this is the cavity side. See, Mr. Camera, cavity side. This is the core side, and we'll see how well this comes out. This actually is pretty easy to pop out because all the features are really not very high profile, right? If I had, for instance, a wall in here that was, that deep and really thin, that's a lot of surface area, and it would be difficult to break it loose and pop it out. So this worked pretty well. You can see in the mold, can you all see that I scratched my initials in the part, and it showed up in the mold. It's not very deep, but I scratched my initials on the inside of the part, and it showed up on there. And it's not a very deep scratch. In the right light, you can see it. And it'll transfer over to the part that I make out of this. So let me inspect
What
this.
is this little bulge here? Like, why is...
That is where the clay came in to create a surface.
Yeah, but...
Why did I do it?
Yeah, why didn't we scrape the clay off?
Okay, so it looked like this, right? Actually, we never saw this because this is not the way we did it. We did it this way, right?
And there's a depression on that side.
Yeah. So when this was created, right, it was actually upside down, so we'd have to remove this, right? So, okay. Why did I have it so that the clay sort of stuck out?
Yeah.
Because I could get my fingers on it. I can get a tool on it if it's sticking out. If it's and it doesn't matter whether it's the predominantly out here or predominantly in there. I just need a barrier to keep the cavity in here from filling up with silicone when I poured the first half.
Yeah.
And I made it with a little dent right there as a locator, just as an extra feature, so that it will find its exact place.
Got it.
And so that it won't be slightly off.
So you didn't
yes.
if you just had if we don't cut a hole in our lamp, we don't have to worry about that.
That part won't appear in a lampshade that doesn't have a hole in it.
Yeah,
So now I'm going to go in and pull out the little pieces of hot glue that I can see that were in some of these holes. I can use one of these longer ones.
Andy, if you
Yes.
had a really wide thing that you were casting, would the silicone ever sag under its own weight so that
Sometimes.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that you can do to
You can reinforce the mold. You can make the mold thicker.
You put wire in the mold?
You can do I guess, but you can also design the part so that
you wouldn't cast it or you?
yeah, you can cast it vertically. You can also make a really robust frame for it that will not allow the silicone to flex. You can also use a much stiffer silicone with a mold to mold something that you're talking about. So there are lots of options. It's not an uncommon thing to have a large piece. Maybe you're trying to cast this. Okay, there's an awful lot of space here for the silicone mold to squish together before you put the stuff in there, and there are lots of ways to do it. Some of them are a denser, I guess, less flexible material, right? Higher diameter, structure to the tool, pouring vertically. So I'm looking through these little vent holes just to see that they're not clogged with stuff, and this one is clogged because I used hot glue to put these wires in. So I'm just sort of getting rid of the hot glue. I want that to be a vent that actually vents out air and isn't already clogged with something.
Those holes seem very tiny.
They are tiny. Which is all the more reason to make sure that they're open. This was blocking one of the holes. That's another nice thing about using a rod like this that was actually straight, because you can see through it better. If this thing is super wiggly, you can't see directly through because the shape of the contour of the hole that you've created. So this looks pretty good. Yep, I think we can go on to the next step with this part. This thing, I'm going to try to get some of this, some of the silicone off that we don't need. Okay, so that, I'm not sure why that happened, but there's a little cavity right here. That must have been not enough Vaseline right there, and it bonded. And when I pulled it apart, it tore a little piece off.
That's okay, is it not?
No, I think it's fine, because it's not extra. It's not like this is flat and this is extra. The two pieces look like they'll fit together quite well. But you can see here, I've got that extra material. I'm going to see if that comes off. If not, I'm going to continue with the demo, because that's the fun part. And you don't care if I have a messed up part. You just don't want yours to be messed up. I heard
Like,
that.
why is it just not enough for Vaseline that would have happened?
Yeah, if right. What happened was, it was like this when we poured this part in, and it was sort of capable of doing. It would wiggle like that. Okay, so obviously there was a spot that was just a little bit too much of a gap, and the silicone got right down in there.
Could you
If
put
you-
clay?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, if you knew that was there, you could clay it.
Okay.
But I didn't know it was there, so
Or can you just do it anyway? Just on the top, just surface layer?
if you want to. Yeah, it's not a bad precaution. Whatever you add in the way of clay, if it's near the part, it will become part of it'll probably become part of the final shape. So just keep that in mind. So if you're going to put clay on there, just make sure the shape that it takes is acceptable to you. Or you're going to have to sand off whatever extra is there that you don't like. Any questions so far while I'm attempting magic? Anybody? Anybody? Poor camera can't see a thing. Anybody? Nobody? Anybody have interesting stories about their own casting that they want to share?
It's imaginary right now. So.
Okay. Okie doke. So, moving forward with the number of workshops we have left, I think this is like the second to last formal workshop where I actually get up here and talk to you.
Whoa.
The next bunch, and there are, I think, we can check the schedule, but I think it's something like 3 beyond that, where we're all going to be here. You're going to be working on your lamp. And I'll get up and talk if I need to, but there's nothing scheduled, okay? Because by now I've taught you everything that you need to know to move forward. You're also going to need to spend some time putting together all the pieces we've made and doing wiring and all that stuff. And yes, we showed you how to wire. I'm not sure how I'm going to wire mine because it's still in that state. When I get my lampshade out, I'm going to wire it all up and tell you what I've learned. And the people who are better at that than me can help you and help me help you get your lamp just the way you want it. Okay.
Do you have an example of what those wires look like?
Yeah, they're little tiny. You want to pull out a spool? It's really narrow wire.
So you probably want to do red and black for your power and your ground, and then a third color for the data down, so that you can choose your own color. That's part of the creativity of this assignment. But I think you should be able to just do it just rewire. Cool.
An actual electrical engineer would know that each of those colors has a meaning, but where are they? I don't see anybody here who's going to complain.
Another thing to note is that thank you for filling out the form, everyone that's done it. As you finish steps, you can update your answers. I'll keep that thing live. And I'll be looking at this just to kind of see what kind of help we need and give you guys and so on and so forth. This is just a spreadsheet of all your polling answers of how far you are with your lamp. So thank you. This is super helpful for us to know.
Yeah, we're not using this information against you. We're attempting to use it to help you. Right, that's now, yeah. Wait till later. We just need a sample of your brain tissue for marketing purposes. All right, I'm not going to attempt to get this perfect. It's not perfect. Hopefully you'll learn from me, from watching me do it, sort of how to avoid the mistakes. Basically the only mistake is that I've got this
What was that caused by?
ridge. It was caused by a gap between the part and this side of the mold when I poured this side. And a little bit of silicone just slid right down.
Is there a way to prevent that?
Yeah. We can Vaseline the mold, we can clay the top of this piece so that it won't get in there. There are a bunch of ways. I didn't know I was going to do it, or else I would have.
How would you
Done it better.
clay the top? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, that means when it's in here and you haven't poured this yet,
Yeah.
you can get little bit of clay, or you could probably
We're playing
use.
with it.
Yeah, there you go. And you could just make tiny little snakes and stick it in there and
Oh,
just
I
rub it
see.
around. And that'll create a little barrier
Yeah.
so that the stuff won't go down there. Okay. Does that make sense? Does
But
everyone
then that means it'll be
understand?
bumpy on the other side.
But this side is already cast as a mold. So you might get a wall thickness that,
Yeah.
that opens up and closes
Yeah,
down a
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
But it's probably not perceptible.
Oh, that's fair.
If you have to have a constant wall thickness, you'd spend much more time avoiding that,
Right.
really. So,
Right.
okay.
And will the lines for the hot glue show up in the part as well?
Yeah, everything that you can see here will show up in the part.
But it'll be
That's good and bad.
Okay.
Yeah, so everything will. Did you see the I little scratch my little initials
Yeah,
in there?
yeah.
That'll show up too.
Who got my name on there?
So yeah, if you are still in the, yeah, sure, you're still in this stage of making the patterns, put your name on it. Just, or scribble your name, or put a, whatever, if you've got a family symbol or something, put it on there. Well, I'm thinking Prince had that really cool thing. So, that way we know whose this is here in the studio, but you also know whose it is out, when it's out in the real world back at your home. Okay, take some pride in it.
Structurally strong enough to put something through it when you put the casting material in there.
Where's your baby?
Do I think
So
it'll?
those two things are going to stick out, right?
Yes, these are 2 ears, and you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there a Sharpie? Oh, this will work. I'm going to mark this side down. Okay. And when I inject it with resin, I'm going to hold it like this so that this side is down, right? See that? This side is down, right? And it's going to fill up, because I don't have little vents on these, but they're just half round. So if I can get the resin to go down in there, it'll come up and it'll push the air out. There's no sharp corner in there to catch air.
Right.
Does that make sense? Okay. Good. Should I put this together and squirt some resin in? That's the fun part. Okay, what's the other half of the wall? Look at that. Okay. I know. Let's see. So, to idiot-proof it myself, remember I put, like, on one corner, it's really obvious that it only goes together one way, because really, I mean, if you're strong enough, you can get the thing to go together wrong, okay? Or if all of your little bumps were, if you bought these registration marks, there was in the past an entire industry around casting stuff like this, and you could just go to the store and buy a bag of these if you had a big shop. Just pull one out, drop it here, pull one out, drop it here, or they might be brass pins. If you were going to use this a lot, not for a silicone mold, but for a harder urethane mold, you would get brass pins and put them in the corner, and on the other side you would have brass, little brass holes, and they would go together, and you would cast right over one. And you would have to do it in such a way that you could register it properly and not do it 90 degrees off or 180 degrees off.
Andy, does it make sense then if we were to make it in different shapes, like circle, square?
Yeah,
triangle?
whatever you want to do, sure.
Would that
Or
be-
even just do this and just make sure. If you make them by hand, they're all different.
Oh, I see. what you're
And
saying.
I just put an extra one down there so that it's at least visually obvious which way I should put together, which gives me half a chance of doing it correctly. All right. There is a thing of dispenser of clear packing tape in there somewhere, if you would be so kind to grab that for me. Thank you. So you don't need a whole lot. Remember when we were looking at the injection molding stuff? They had presses that were measured in tonnage, and they would have to be pushing this way at what was the number of like 10 or 5 or 20 ton presses, right? Because the pressure squirting the resin in would just, it just squirt right out the side if it didn't have that pressure holding it. Okay. This is very low pressure. I'm gonna whatever I can inject in with a little syringe is the pressure we get, and since it's all fully vented, the air is going to just push right out. So we need virtually nothing for pressure to hold this shut. Okay, but I'm putting tape on there so that it won't accidentally, like if you just inject a little bit too much too fast, you can lift a corner and like burp a little bit out the side. I just want to prevent that from happening. Okay, and it doesn't have to. Pardon?
Yeah, why are you blocking holes?
I can poke those out. That's okay.
How do you know how much resin you want?
I don't yet. I suppose one way to do it is to put the fill a graduated beaker with water, drop this into it, and then pull it out. And however much water was displaced, that's how much I'm going to inject in, plus a little bit for all the other little vents and sprue and gates and stuff. That's one way to do it. I can estimate that I will probably need. I had little syringes. What is that?
Is it,
Let's go over there
if you
somewhere.
see it leaking off the top, is that too much?
If it's leaking off the top, that means you've filled the tool. There might be air in there, but it means at least you've filled up what you intended to do.
That seems good.
If it's coming out the vent holes, yeah, you're good. Oh, I think I might put the syringes over there. There they are. Yeah. Okay, so I can take a look at this and see that inside this, there's probably enough resin to do most, but not all, of one. So I'm going to fill this thing up twice. I'm
Let's do
also
that.
Definitely cannot estimate.
all right. Well, just in your mind, melt this down and see how much of it fits in here.
Ah,
Yes.
of course.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I always win at those Hershey. Guess how many Hershey
Hershey
kisses?
Kisses are in the bowl.
So I'm also going to cut this off because I really don't need.
Or your safety glasses.
Missed.
There must be some interesting way for me to blame the victim on this. I'll think of something. Okay. So
I
now
seconded it.
you asked me. Now, is that actually useful to you guys? Okay. There is tape over some of these little vents, but you'll also notice that the tape doesn't really stick to the silicone. So even just the gravity pressure of putting it down in there, you'll see the resin come up and touch the tape. But to just be to teach about airflow and all that, we'll poke little holes in here. And now we should be set. Okay, now we've got venting, we've got a place that we're going to pour this stuff in. I'm not going to pour it in like a funnel. I'm going to fill this thing up, and then I'm going to squirt it in with this. Okay, does that make sense? So now I just need Shakti, since you're on that side, would you be so kind as to grab some gloves for me? And
Your preference in size?
medium, please.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
I guess you.
And somewhere over here we have the little containers of the casting resin. And do we have a mixing cup? You can see how prepared I am today. This is fantastic. I'm sure you're so proud of me. Are you going to steal that? Or you can if you want. It's fine.
Why do you need it?
It was in airflow.
Smooth cast. Yep, that's it. Is there another one over there? Thank you. Perfect.
Is this all the
Okay.
same stuff as that?
So this is, it says smooth cast, okay? And what we're doing is casting a part out of this, okay? This says off-white liquid plastic, okay? Does that, and I'm not being facetious or anything, but does that make sense that it's different from something that might be called rubber? Okay, I'm only
The
asking.
bottles look the same. It's just
The
that's
bottles look
label.
the same. It's just
Oh,
really,
geez,
it's
that's
really
horrible,
bad.
you guys.
It's bad. Yes.
And same
That
graphics.
signifier, I know.
Put a label on
The
it.
worst.
I'm wondering,
Well, no,
there was a TA last week, I won't name any names, who actually mixed the wrong thing.
Yeah, the TA for my work. Now I-
Like name
But you see now, you can say it's a design fault, not the fault of the human.
Oh, it's a design fault, sure, but at some point you have to be smarter than the machinery you operate.
Damn.
At some
Well,
point.
you gotta design the lowest common denominator here.
I just cut it like very simply.
All right. Does anyone recognize this? Anybody know who this drawing is? May I use it as drop cloth or do you? Okay, great. Good. That way I don't have to like get tons of everything.
Is this what the candles still look like?
What?
I feel bad. That's my bag.
There are candles?
This is, yeah, busted up candles. Like, is you making them into something else?
It was just one candle.
Well, it's just one candle.
It smelled like sweating, but it was just one.
The one that tried to kill you?
Yeah. The nostrils are very sensitive.
Is there another cup? Does somebody have another cup? Thank you all for your patience on my lack of preparation.
Like a same size?
I just need two things that are roughly the same size and then a place to mix it.
Are these too small?
Those would be, oh, I can use that, sure, thank you. Cool. Shot glasses, that's right.
Oh, I thought you were trying to open the bracelet.
Okay, so. Resin shot. That's right, that's what we're doing in New York City,
really
baby.
good about myself.
Resin shots.
About like our
Game changer.
I made Rachel buy something I like,
I'm like,
Nice the best gummies out
I
there.
watch like this. I want your thing to tell me the time.
See, that was also a thought, yeah.
A moment. You can tell me
Okay.
how stressed, looking at how
It
stressed I
says,
am.
what are those flip things?
It was just like,
I brought those home for my kids, they love them. Which means they're probably all sugar. So this says right on it, it's equal volumes of A and B. So some resins will also tell you what they are by weight because they don't weigh the same per volume. And it says if you're going to mix it by weight, it's this. If you're going to mix it by volume, it's this. So this stuff is really user friendly. So they try to do it so that you can go 50, equal parts by volume. So I'm going to do this, right?
Why is it bubbling?
I shook it up.
Oh, okay.
So we're just basically the bubbles.
Chinese medicine samples.
Yeah. Cough syrup.
Yeah.
I think this cough syrup would make you cough, yes.
Cough, yes, blood.
Right. All right, so I like to put the thinner stuff in first and into the mixing cup because if I put the thicker stuff in, it sticks to the cup and it's harder to scrape it up and
Which is
scrape
the
it off.
thinner one?
But if I put the thinner stuff in, it almost acts like a little barrier.
Brown first.
And then,
Oh.
like if you were mixing, for instance, like I guess honey and oats in a bowl. If you put the oats in first and then the honey, you'd have a better chance of starting to mix it because otherwise the honey would stick to the bowl and you'd have to scrape it all up. That's kind of the analogy here. So here is my. This doesn't take a whole lot to mix it up, but you will notice if you don't mix it at all, or if you forget, for instance, and only do part A, you're not going to get a part. You're just going to get a mold full of something that will never close up. What is that?
And you need to cut it off.
I know Bob can do it.
That's not an actual legal defense, is it? So I've got my finger underneath the end of the syringe, and this is pretty. See how thin that is? We're going to have no trouble at all mixing this up. I actually might just come over here and do this.
Whoa. You don't need to inject it.
wait, no. Yeah. You have to do it again.
I will. We're nowhere near done yet. So I wanted to raise this end up and I forgot, right? So we'll do that this
So
way.
Andy, it becomes a funnel, not an injection.
Yeah, with something this thin. I didn't know this was going to be this thin. So we have the opportunity to just use it as a funnel, which is nice.
So it cures and it turns white?
It'll turn an off-white color once it cures. And if you have time, you can stick around and watch it do that.
How long does it take?
So that's my second syringe, right? Or two, like, that's like almost 2 full. So we'll see how good my estimation was. I could be off by an order of magnitude. I really have no idea.
How long does it take to
Let's read that.
10 to 20 minutes, hot
Yep, 10 to 20 pot life, and then 2 to 4 cure.
Oh, 2 to 4 hours.
It
Okay.
seems
Yep.
just as exciting as watching paint dry.
Washing resin cure in the cup.
Except you can't even see the resin.
Yeah.
In this case,
Yeah. Okay.
Shrinkage won't be, okay, there you go, it's coming out.
Oh,
There you go.
So is that what you want?
Anyone else ready?
I mean, should we panic or not?
Panic. In this case,
Does that mean it's too
the entire part is below this line, thank you. So if I do have a leak, it will not drain the mold of its vital fluids, right? Thank you. So if I turn the mold, if for some reason I had a mold where the parting line was in the middle of the part, where you have to fill up from the top, and you know, if a break like this could drain half of the resin onto the ground, and you wouldn't have a good part. That's not the case here.
So does that mean that the whole thing is all filled up and you're done?
Yeah, the whole thing is filled up to the best of my knowledge. We may have a bubble right in between every single one of these vents. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. All that. If I absolutely had to have this thing perfect, I would right now put it into a vacuum, draw a vacuum out, and all the bubbles would basically explode under no pressure, and they'd find their way out. They would just scoot right out the vents.
Why would they do that?
Because a bubble inside of here is under a little bit of pressure, atmospheric pressure, and a little bit of pressure from the resin. If you remove like 95% of the atmospheric pressure, it basically boils at the same temperature. It'll boil the air right out of the fluid, and the air will just escape. It'll basically, the tiny little bubble will become huge, and the only place for it to go is out. And once it's gone, there's no air in there behind it, so the void will be filled by resin. If you and there are some ways that you can pour stuff into a mold that's already under vacuum, and in that case you don't need any sort of ventilation because there's no air. You pour it directly in, and it flows in much like it would in an injection mold where air is not a consideration. It just completely fills the void. This is super low tech, except for the materials. The materials are fairly high tech. But you could do the same kind of thing with plaster. If you got the chemistry right with what you were pouring and the plaster mold and what you use for mold release. And plaster has been used for casting metal for ages.
How much do these things cost? Like the entire material cost for doing this?
This kit is, if I'm remembering right, something on the order of 20, something in the mid-20s. The same with the silicone. It's in the mid-20s per kit, and this is, how big is this kit? They do it by weight instead of volume, which is stupid. But anyway, this looks like, what, 1.5 liters maybe? Or a whole liter for $25? The silicone is priced roughly the same, and some of the offerings from this company are very expensive because of what they do, and some are a lot cheaper, probably, and because more people want them, and they're cheaper to make. So
why do we just not like take the syringe off and let it settle? Like, why
I want to keep a little bit of pressure head on there, because the resin does shrink a tiny bit, and if I took that away, it might shrink it might shrink down through the vents or something, or it might shrink and create a bubble where I don't want one. So if I keep that there, I'm pretty certain that there's no bubble directly between here and the bottom of the mold. And that's really all I know. But I want to keep a little bit of pressure on that, so that if bubbles are moving around, if they're formed somewhere, we give it a chance to get out of there, and the pressure will actually help drive the air out.
So you just let it cure in the syringe and then
Yeah.
you just throw it away?
Throw the syringe away, yeah. So I mentioned before that the goal, of course, for all of us is to produce things sustainably. Prototyping and model making isn't there yet. So there's a cost to doing the early work. That it's relatively high. I don't even know if it's carbon footprint is the right word, or landfill footprint, I think is probably a good way to think of it. But what we're throwing away is going to be totally inert, so it's not going to be dangerous. Okay, and this is, I guess, a very small percentage of the goal of producing something in a way that's environmentally friendly. But to get to that point, to get your business people on board, you have to make models and prototypes. To get testing done, you have to make models and prototypes. And if you are interested in pursuing that, there are probably many ways to develop, eco-friendly prototyping and model making stuff. It's way better than it used to be. In the old days, all the chemicals were like lead-based, and you had to cut down a whole forest to build stuff. So it's all different. Now we cut down the chemical forest to get this stuff. So if this had a leak in it too, I'd be able to see that come down.
So is it going to come out and have like a layer of like...
Flashing? Yeah, it could very well have flashing. Flashing would be if I put too much pressure on it. You can see it's already starting to. That's already starting to kick off. It's already curing. Right there. See how it's turning white?
Yeah.
It's just now starting to go white. Right around here.
Oh, it happens so suddenly.
Yeah, that's neat.
Do you have to shake it?
No.
I mean, for the bubbles to come
Oh,
out.
I did, but if it's starting to cure, the bubbles aren't going to move.
Yeah.
So.
It's like egg. It's like
That's right. We're frying an egg. You get the first bite.
Nom 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 nom.
So, I'm not sure why that part of it is curing first. I would have thought that the largest mass would kick first because it's exothermic, it generates heat, and heat makes it cure faster. This is probably warm though. Yeah, that's warm. Anyone want to touch it? It's fairly clean. It's getting pretty warm, and that's just a chemical reaction of it from going from liquid to solid plastic.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of cool.
Just flow resin over and over. Just flow resin over and over again or something.
Well, we used to do that in the old days.
Can you melt it once it's cured?
This is a thermoset. And the set part means that it is all set. It's not doing anything else. A thermoplastic. The word plastic means changeable. So thermoplastic means you can go from solid to liquid or fluid, and then back to solid, and that kind of thing. Like water is kind of thermoplastic, right? It has three phases that are all dependent on heat and temperature. Sort of like plastics. Thermoplastic. Thermosets, it's a single use. You go from two parts and the chemical change into something completely different, and they cannot go backwards. But a thermoplastic starts as a plastic in solid, and it goes to a plastic in a liquid, and then hardens into a plastic that's solid, and you can recycle that a number of times without the chemistry changing. This chemistry changes.
That's how we get there.
It's possible that the contact with the silicone had some reaction with, or even the sometimes the adhesive on tapes messes things up. So it could be reacting to that.
How do you know when it's done?
Well, I know when it's done when I open it up and it doesn't come out in liquid form. And that's that's not a really good answer. It says 2 to 4 hours. So if it's pretty warm in here, so we could probably go on the 2 hour side.
Yeah.
If I was doing this in my barn and it was 10 degrees C colder, I would go on the 4 hour side.
Okay.
And when I was doing molding in large volumes, we would tune our pours so that we would do one first thing in the morning, depending on the chemistry. We do one in the morning, and maybe one in the middle of the day, and then maybe one at the end of the day that went all night curing. So it depends on what it is. If you're doing 1 or 2 very high value things, then you can take all the time in the world to babysit them and make sure they're perfect.
Yeah.
But if you've got 10 molds, and I had this one thing that was an air-powered like squirt gun. Have you all seen caulking guns?
Yeah.
This was 2 tubes, and you put A and B resin in one, and it had a mixing wand. And as it went through the wand, it would fold itself over and mix the resin. And it had, I think, like a 10-second pot life and a 15-minute demold. So we would put the molds, would line them all up, and I would have the gun, and it had a compressed air line coming to it. And somebody would be holding the molds, and I would just come up and go, and it would fill it in. We'd see the vents fill, and go to the next one, fill the vents,
So much fun.
fill the vents. It was kind of cool. Really, the consumables were outrageously expensive, but I needed to get like 100 parts in a few days. That's how we did it.
Andy,